You have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you.
The Gospels tell the greatest story ever told. Jesus Christ, God become man who suffered and died to save us. But despite being a cradle Catholic, I've never read them all the way through, and that changes now. Join me as we journey through the life of our Savior, his words, his miracles, and his sacrifice like never before. Today it's Matthew 5, 6, and 7, and we have a huge reading today because we're starting with the Sermon on the Mount. Now, Jesus starts with the Beatitudes, and there are some really good resources on YouTube. I would highly recommend the Bible Project to break all of these down. But the one that really speaks to me and stands out is when he says, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God." And as Jesus continues to the rest of his teachings here, I think it'll show you why that one stands out. Also, he says, "You are the salt of the earth," which, again, another saying that we've heard 1,000 times, but probably didn't know where it came from. The Sermon on the Mount is full of really difficult lessons, including, "You have heard that it was said to those of old, you shall not murder, but whoever murders will be liable to judgment. But I say to you that everyone who is angry with his brother will be liable to judgment." So it's not just that you can't murder, it's that holding hatred or resentment or anger in your heart is just the same. And even, "You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, but if anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn him the other also." So if anyone hits you or hurts you or wrongs you, you're supposed to offer up more of yourself to that person. But I think most importantly, "You have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy, but I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you." That's really what it seems to boil down to. Don't just love your family and your friends and those who already love you. Jesus even says, "For if you love those who love you, what reward do you have? Do not even tax collectors do the same?" There's a line in Game of Thrones, bear with me here, whether you like the show, haven't seen the show, and it's from a not so good character, but what he says is magnificent.
"We only make peace with our enemies, my lord. That's why it's called making peace."
Jesus isn't just challenging us to make peace with our enemies. He's challenging us to love our enemies, to pray for those who persecute us. It can already be hard sometimes to love the people that we actually love, and then loving the people who don't like us, who hate us, and who persecute us is a whole other can of worms. But I think it encapsulates everything that he's teaching here on the Sermon on the Mount, because it's truly at the end of the day about love, or at least that's just the way that I read it. What a world we would have if we all loved our enemies and prayed for those who persecuted us. And then we turn to chapter 6, where the Sermon on the Mount continues. The theme of chapter 6 seems to pretty clearly be, don't do things for other people to see them. Do things because they're the right thing to do and because your Father in heaven sees them. Thus, when you give to the needy, sound no trumpet before you do, as the hypocrites in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may be praised by others. Calling them hypocrites, man. The religious leaders, the lawmen, the politicians, they're like the people on the pedestal. And he's clearly angry when you use a word like hypocrite. "And when you pray, you must not be like the hypocrites, for they love to stand and pray in the synagogues, that they may be seen by others." And this is one I find myself reading pretty often. "Therefore I tell you, do not be anxious about your life, what you will eat or what you will drink, nor about your body, what you will put on. Is not life more than food and the body more than clothing?" When I'm anxious, the last thing I want to be told is do not be anxious, but it's different when it's coming from God, knowing that everything will be okay, everything will be taken care of, and it's okay not to be anxious. Just pretty often something that I really need to read and really need to hear. And then Matthew brings in the logical side to things when he quotes Jesus saying, "And which of you, by being anxious, can add a single hour to his span of life?" If you're not reading along with this series, I would challenge you that next time you do feel anxious about something, just go read Matthew chapter 6, and I think it might help you, because I know it's helped me. I just love the way this ends so much. "Therefore, do not be anxious about tomorrow, for tomorrow will be anxious for itself. Sufficient for the day is its own trouble." And chapter 7 really brings everything to a head. "Why do you see the speck that is in your brother's eye, but do not notice the log that is in your own eye?" I kind of read this as you're throwing stones from a glass house. Like, nobody is perfect. Nobody has the perfect life or lives the perfect life. So why are you judging others for how they present themselves or for what they do? That's not love. Going back to loving your enemy, whether they're your enemy or not, judging someone is not loving them. And this all connects so well together. Reading them all together makes such a profound difference, and I can't recommend to you enough to pick up a Bible and read Matthew 5, 6, and 7. And of course, I'm sure we've all heard of the golden rule. "So whatever you wish that others would do to you, do also to them, for this is the law and the prophets." Treat others the way you want to be treated. We've heard about it since we were literally able to understand English. I think it was before school. We've always heard that. And this is where it comes from.
And one last verse that you've probably heard if you've attended a Christian wedding.
Everyone who hears these words of mine and does them will be like a wise man who built his house on the rock. And the rain fell and the floods came and the winds blew and beat on that house, but it did not fall because it had been founded on the rock. Even if you build your house on the rock, the rains and floods and winds will still come. By hearing these words and doing what he says to do, living this way, the rains and floods will not tear you down. They will not beat you. They will not break you. Man, I love the Sermon on the Mount. Those are 3 really big chapters, and to include them all in one day, I think feels like a lot, but tomorrow we have some miracles, starting with chapter 8. So I'll see you guys tomorrow.